All right, hello everybody. Once again, my name is Adam White, and it is time for another Advocacy with Adam here with the Alaska Airmen's Association. And we've got a long list of things to talk about, but first let me start off by saying it's good to make it through another year. Thank you for your involvement and your participation in the Alaska Airmen's Association. And if you're a member, definitely appreciate your involvement there. If you're not a member, I encourage you to participate that way. You can go to our website and find out more information about the benefits of membership and go ahead and sign up while you're there. Speaking of going to our website, there's a lot of great information available for you there. There's the past advocacy updates that are there, access to past editions of the transponder, our publication that we send out a few times a year, and also important announcements. And some of the important announcements is that we are in a search right now for a new executive director. And if you want to know more information about that and the job qualifications and all of those things, you can go to alaskaairmen.org and find out more information there. We're also, it's a time of year where we look for a few new board members. Just normal attrition happens with the board and terms of service and all those kinds of things, term limits and everything else. And so there's a couple of slots open on the board as well, the board of directors. So if you're interested in that, I encourage you to go to our website as well and find out more information there. While you're there, before we get to advocacy stuff, because it's pretty important that I remind you about raffle tickets. They are on sale once again, and encourage you to go get those raffle tickets. We are slightly ahead of pace from previous years in selling these raffle tickets, and you can go online and purchase those. They make great stocking stuffers. I'm a little jealous that being involved with the Airmen's Association makes it so that I cannot participate in possibly winning the raffle airplane. So that saves me a little bit of money, buys me a little bit of fuel to go flying around on my own. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started with the long list of things that I've got for us this month here with Advocacy with Adam. Just a reminder, some of the things we talk about are definitely still in play and in process and are not completed. These are updates. Some of these things that I talk about are things that are slightly over the horizon that I think are coming up and we need to kind of be prepared for. Some things we're deep in the throes of. And so just a reminder about some of those things. I try my best to kind of give you what that status is so you know where we play into those all these issues. So last month we talked about Class E and Class G airspace here in Alaska, and I appreciate the fact that the FAA was responsive to some of those questions that I presented, and I wasn't the only one that was asking them some questions about the need for that change. Just to go back briefly and recap what happened there, we've got large expanses of Class G airspace here in Alaska, uncontrolled airspace. And uncontrolled not just to 700-foot AGL or 1,200 AGL, but way up there up into flight level 180 before it gets into Class A airspace. And the reason for that is back in the day, there was no need to control that airspace. There was no way to control that airspace, and so they just did not control it. They left it as Class G. Now with the advent of different types of airframes that are flying around in the state, and with ADS-B and GPS and all these other things, they are actually clearing some IFR traffic through some areas that are technically uncontrolled. And so that gets a little confusing, and it's a little difficult to do that for ATC, for Anchorage Center, and a little confusing for the pilots in some cases as to what does that mean for them when they have a clearance, but yet it's still uncontrolled. So based on those questions and other things that had happened, the FAA realized that maybe they were a little premature in issuing that notice of proposed rulemaking because of all the questions that were being asked. And during that process of making public comments, they can't really respond and answer questions and go back and change their proposal. And they realized that maybe they jumped the gun a little bit. So they withdrew the request. They withdrew the proposal. That doesn't mean it's going to go away forever. That just means that the FAA is kind of pulling back, reconsidering, and going to do some more public outreach as to why that request was made and why that proposal was listed in the Federal Register. So I consider this a win. not that we defeated something, because we haven't, but it was a win in the fact that we asked some questions. The FAA worked with us and with AOPA and with some other entities here in Alaska, and saying, hey, help us understand what's going on so we can better understand what you're trying to do. And so that's what's going to happen now. I don't know when we can expect that new proposal to come back to the Federal Register, but when it does, I'll be sure to let you know. So, moving down the list a little bit further here, the Anchorage airspace redesign. We talk about that just about every month. The latest information I have for you on that is that there is movement there. There's been some new procedures that have been kind of going through as far as instrument procedures for some of the airports in the Anchorage Bowl. This next step in this process is in the middle of January, is when the ad hoc committee will be meeting. That is a very formal part of this incredibly detailed process from the National Environmental Policy Act from the 1970s. And it's rigid. I'm not going to lie. It's a little frustrating working through the rigidity of this system, but the system is there. We need to work the system. We need to go through and participate in the system. And the Alaska Airmen's Association, myself specifically, will be a part of that ad hoc committee. And what that ad hoc committee is going to do, starting with the first meeting in the middle of January, is we will be able to see the proposal that the FAA is going to put out. We'll be able to look at it. We'll be able to ask questions. What the ad hoc committee is responsible for doing is offering feedback to the FAA. The ad hoc committee cannot change the proposal. We can only offer recommendations. The ad hoc committee is kind of the first step. It's kind of like a soft opening for a restaurant, to use that analogy, where the FAA comes in and says, look, this is what we're going to present. This is what we're trying to accomplish. What do you think? Pick it apart. Let us know where you think we're going to have problems. At that point, the FAA will then pull back the proposal and look at it again and maybe take into some of the things that we said and consider them. They may modify a few things here or there. And then after that process is complete, then it will be released to the public for the public process, and there will be numerous meetings in the Anchorage area, in the Matsu area, and the Kenai area, all around that part of the state, to have an opportunity for the public to be engaged and to understand and see the proposal. And then there's an opportunity for the public to comment. So here's what I'm going to need you to do. In the middle of January, I will be able to see what the proposal is at this point, along with everybody else on the ad hoc committee. And there's going to be quite a few people there that's participating in that committee process. We should not give you the graphics and the explanations and all those things and the details of what that request is coming forward with. We can probably talk to you about what the broad generalizations look like and what the major changes in the airspace is probably going to look like, to kind of help you understand what's going on. But here's why I'm not willing to tell you all the details starting in the middle of January, because I hope they're going to change. And if I tell you what they are then, and then they change and we go look at them later, for those of you who are flight instructors and teachers and instructors in other areas, you may have actually heard this as a student pilot, but the law of primacy plays into this as well. The first thing you hear tends to be the thing that you remember the longest. I don't want to do that to you. And so we're going to hold off until it's released for the public to get into the details, to go through and do all that. Most likely what will happen is I will do a special Advocacy with Adam segment about just the Anchorage airspace redesign. I'll go through it in details. I'll be able to put graphics up here on the YouTube video and be able to go through and explain and point out the problem areas that I see, point out areas of concern, point out areas that I'm going to need your feedback on, and go and work through it that way. The Airmen's Association will also most likely hold an in-person and hybrid meeting, a virtual and in-person meeting at our facility at Lake Hood on this issue when we get into that public process, so that we can sit down and talk face-to-face. We can answer your questions directly and be a lot more interactive than just a YouTube video. And so anticipate that happening when we get to that process. Now, I know what your next question is going to be. It's like, okay, Adam, when is that going to happen? When are we going to do that? I wish I had an answer for you, but I just don't. The ad hoc process, that we're going to start in the middle of January. There is no official timeline for that. As a matter of fact, the FAA cannot pressure the ad hoc committee to accomplish their task in a set, rigid time frame. The FAA has to allow the ad hoc process to work through its natural course, and however long it takes, it takes. I hope that we can get through it fairly quickly so we can get this out to the public after the FAA has a chance to review what the ad hoc committee presents. But there have been some of these processes that have taken months and almost a year for the ad hoc committee to work through. I don't think that's where we're going to run into here, but you never really know. So I guess what I'm telling you is I don't have an answer for when the public process of this whole redesign is going to start. But rest assured, when it does, you will hear about it, and I will tell you about it, and I will be making sure that you're going to be tired of hearing me talk about it. You may already be tired of me talking about it, but that's what's going on. So we're going to move on to some other things because there's a lot of other issues to talk about here. ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, I think is what that acronym stands for, part of the United Nations. Basically, it's a way for member nations, like 193, I think, if that number, that's just going off of my top of my head, countries that participate in sharing information, making sure regulations are fairly much in line, policies and procedures are all standardized, so that when you fly from one part of the world to another, while things may be different, the big stuff is all the same. ICAO is contemplating, and I'm choosing these words very carefully, ICAO is contemplating making a recommendation to go away from using magnetic north in navigation and clearances and runway headings and legacy nav aid alignments, all the kind of things that we use magnetic north as a reference. ICAO is contemplating changing and going to true north. Maybe that has some, actually thinking through some of that, airports, the runway number would always stay the same because it's always going to be a reference to true north if this were to happen. The magnetic variation, the changes that have to happen with VORs, with other legacy nav aids, ILS procedures specifically, runway alignments, all those things, but then also we navigate with GPS for the most part, right? Here's my take. Most of us in the state of Alaska either navigate by memory. We know the drainages, we know the ridge tops, we know the hills, we know the valleys, we know where we are and we know where we're going. We don't need a map. We don't need nav aids. We've done this countless times before. We know how to get where we're going. Other times, we use just a map and reference and look at it. Are we going with the compass and converting back from the declination of, because that's a big thing here because we're so far north, 18, 20, 25 degrees, 15 degrees change, that you've got to go back and work that math to figure out what the true heading would be versus magnetic heading. We don't really do that much. I know that when in flight school, we all had to work through those things. But the other thing that most people do is they just hit that D with the arrow through it button on their GPS, that direct button, and they program it to go direct to their destination, whether it's a waypoint, an off-airport location, an airport, wherever it is, we just go direct, right? So does it really matter if we're referencing magnetic north or true north? There's some concerns that I have with that, and we're going to have to work through them. The FAA is reviewing that policy. Canada as a nation has gone through and actually has some areas north of the 60-degree parallel, which actually would be the same that we would be here in Alaska and further north. They have some areas where they are referencing doing everything by true north. And so this is a 3-year process that ICAO is gathering information and gathering data. The FAA is looking at this and evaluating this proposal to see whether or not they would do it nationwide or if they would do it north of the contiguous United States, which would be Alaska, if it would be a certain parallel here within Alaska, which I think is a bad idea. If we're going to do it, it needs to be all of Alaska. Actually, I think if we're going to do it, we just ought to do it. If the ICAO does this, it needs to be a standard worldwide. Here's the other part of the problem that could be a potential issue. Avionics manufacturers are saying that this might be a difficult change, especially for some of their older pieces of equipment. Honeywell specifically has mentioned some of their flight management systems. They're not going to be able to go back and reprogram. Garmin has stated in other cases like this that a product that may not be supported any longer, do they go back and rewrite firmware to change some of these things? It may be easier for some of their current hardware to be able to do that. ForeFlight, Garmin Pilot, all those app-based electronic flight bags, that would probably be pretty easy to make that shift in those devices. So this is kind of like a Y2K kind of thing, if you're old enough to remember that, and I realize I'm dating myself. But is this going to be a problem? Is it not? We don't really know yet. But it's a thing that's being kicked around, not just in the FAA, but with Canada and with ICAO along the way as well. So just a couple of other updates, just to kind of give you some update on some aviation news. You probably have already seen some of this, but just to let you know what's going on, there's a potential for medicals to change the way you're submitting paperwork if you have a special issuance, or if you got to go back through and you've been working through supplying some more tests or some more medical records. Up till now, it's always been, well, we'll just wait and delay and you can submit this test. Now, there has been some problems with when you submit the test, the results of a medical exam or a medical test, and it takes the FAA so long to get to it that they say, well, that test result is no longer valid. You got to go back and do it again, and that's very frustrating. So the FAA is actually considering, if that's the case, not putting things on hold and just waiting forever for more information, and then they drag their feet and it takes forever. And I shouldn't say drag their feet, because they've got a lot of things. They have a backlog that's incredible of working through. It sounds like, however, that the FAA is talking about just saying, you don't have all your paperwork, medical denied. Start over. Go back to the end of the line, start again. That's a problem, especially when it may not be the applicant's fault or responsibility. What the FAA is trying to do is put more pressure on the medical examiners to make sure all the paperwork is correct, and when you submit everything, you've got all your ducks in a row, you got the packet all ready to go, so that when it goes to the FAA, they have everything they need and they can just work it right through. If they were to go through this new proposal and just say, you don't have everything, denied, rubber stamp it, go back to the end of the line, start again, well, now you have a denial for a medical on your record that doesn't go away, and you got to tell your insurance company, you got to tell the FAA when you go back to reapply for your medical, was it ever denied? Yes, it was. Why? Well, because I didn't have my paperwork and it took so long to get it through there, you denied it. Anyway, you can kind of see where this is going, right? So this is a problem. All the alphabet groups, including the Alaska Airmen, is making comments about this, letting the FAA know that we think this is probably not a good idea to go this way. We understand what they're trying to accomplish. They're trying to alleviate their backlog, but you don't do it by denying all the requests and then making people start over. That's just not the way to do it. So moving on to some other things, the governor's budget has been released for the state of Alaska. I'm currently reading through that budget. I don't know, I'm a glutton for punishment, but going through that budget and seeing if it has any implications for aviation and what that may look like. So if I find anything, I'll be sure to let you know on that. Also, you may have heard that the FAA Administrator, Mike Whitaker, has announced his resignation effective January 20th. This is not an unusual thing, actually. It's a political appointee. We got a change in leadership, a change in administrations. It's not uncommon that administrators in all the different branches and agencies within the government will submit their resignation, whether or not it's accepted or not, or whatever happens. So it does sound like, though, that Mike Whitaker is wanting to step out of government life and enjoy his retirement. So are there politics involved? I don't know, but that's probably a safe assumption to say that there are, because there's always politics involved when you get to that level of the government. But we'll see what happens with that whole process of confirmation of a new FAA administrator once President Trump is back in office, going through those things. So that's where we are. Looking at some other things here on my list, some other things I'm tracking, some local sales tax issues that could be potentially issues, problems for us, working through some of those. Conversations within the FAA, just some high-level philosophical type discussions that are happening that I've been able to be a part of. Does the FAA need to be in the weather data business? We have the National Weather Service. That is their sole purpose in life, is weather. Does the FAA need to be involved in weather? Does aviation need weather? Absolutely, you bet we do. That's, no doubt. Does it need to be the FAA's responsibility? Maybe, maybe not. That's the kind of conversations that are happening internal to the FAA, not just about that subject, but about a lot of other things along the way. And these are all good conversations to have. These kind of conversations never really scare me or make me nervous. They are serious conversations, and we need to be at the table for these conversations because our needs and point of view need to be considered. Is there going to be a guaranteed change in these things? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. We got to just set these things on the table, work through the exercise, and at the end we say, you know what, we're probably doing okay the way we are, or no, we could absolutely make some improvements here by doing something different. So there's those kinds of conversations that continually happen within the federal government and in the state level of government, to be honest with you. And I need you to know that the Airmen's Association is a part of those conversations. We are offering feedback from the perspective of recreational flying and Part 91 flying, general aviation here in the state of Alaska, and how that may impact decisions made in the lower 48 about aviation as well. So we are definitely part of the conversation. I appreciate your involvement and your role as being a member and supporting the work of the Alaska Airmen's Association. It is an honor and a privilege for me to be able to do these things on your behalf, and I really do appreciate the feedback and the support that you give when you let me know how these things affect you and what your opinion is on them. I do value that input. So here's how you can do that. You can comment here on the video. You can send me an email. My information's easily available on the website. You can call the office and it'll forward to me wherever I might be at any given time. And love to have these conversations. It's great to actually have these conversations face to face. Was able to make it to Anchorage and be there for the annual Christmas party at the Airmen's building, and got to see a lot of you and talk face to face about these issues, and it was a great time. I really enjoyed it. So again, continue with the tradition of these kind of colorful shirts and Hawaiian type shirts, and a little bit of a Christmas theme for this one here. Maybe a little hard to see, but it's always kind of fun doing that. And again, kind of started this back in the COVID era, and you won't let me stop. So have to keep finding some new shirts to wear. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up and just conclude this and just say it's been a great year for us here at the Alaska Airmen's Association. Not everything has been perfect, of course, never is, but we really do miss Abby Austin and her role as Executive Director for the Airmen's Association. Appreciated her leadership and where she got us as an organization. So Abby, if you see this, I want to say thank you personally for what you have done to get the Airmen's where we are. Excited about the opportunities of a new Executive Director and what that may bring for the organization, and maybe getting us to another level. And always looking for some good, valuable people to participate in the Board of Directors just through normal attrition, being able to replace those folks that time off the board. So with that, just want to remind you that go to our website for all kinds of details and information. Thanks for watching, and if you watch YouTube, you know what you're supposed to do. You know, you're supposed to like and subscribe and do all those things. It does actually help the algorithm figure out a better way to get this out beyond just the few hundred people that just look at it every month. So with that, I'll say goodbye, and I'll talk to you next year.